I realize that a lot of times when people talk to me, there are a lot of foundations missing in people's understanding of what leadership is. And so today I'm working on a series to try to lay some basic foundations of the various perspectives of leadership and what I think makes up a good leader. I see that in society today, there are a lot of leadership failures. And I feel like a lot of these pain and unfortunate events are actually quite unnecessary. Hi, I'm Will. I'm currently working as a coach in Singapore. I was previously a software engineer and I've built my own software development firm and I've sold it, operated as a head of engineering for a fintech firm in Singapore. And today I like to work with men who are going through hard things. I think at the foundational level, a lot of leaders stopped working on themselves. This is especially true if they have defined success with some kind of financial number or some kind of revenue number. When they get to the number, they feel like, aha, mission accomplished. And because they get into that state, sometimes there's almost like an arrogance or a negligence of being on guard, of being focused on their purpose and the impact that they bring to themselves and the team and the families that they're surrounded by. So sometimes I think one of the foundational failures is that our own success gets to us and it builds that kind of arrogance and we no longer are guarded and we're no longer leading at that level that we need to operate. So it is very much about developing our own personal self-awareness, our own personal disciplines, our own personal, I would say, self-command. I will use our own personal self-governance that allows us to be able to operate at a certain level. And so the arrogance and the pride, or maybe the complacency, or it could be simply that we have just gotten used to doing the same thing over and over again, and that it becomes mechanical, that we're no longer vigilant and actively trying to lead in the best way that we know how, or we're no longer trying to look for alternative perspectives or alternative methods that can apply to a situation. And because of the arrogance of, oh, I've done it before and I know what needs to be done. And so we keep applying back old methods as opposed to using the methods that would work in that situation. You cannot rely on past patterns. You have to keep on reflecting, keep on getting that feedback loop, and keep on working on that purpose, working on delivering that deep impact in your life. And that's what makes you a leader. Because if you stop working on these things, you still might be holding on the position or the authority of the leader, but you're actually not leading anymore. They think that leadership only happens when they have a team or when there are people reporting to them. I feel like if that is the starting point of leadership for you, you might be too late. Before you can even start showing up for others, you have to learn and you have to train your mind to know how to show up for yourself. I think the challenge is that when pressure hits, when there is real pressure, leaders are reacting. They're no longer responding. In fact, you might find yourself in a situation where you don't have the capacity to plan a response. In sports, you call it muscle memory, right? At the point of time that you're, for example, taking the critical shot, planning the shot, when you're in that pressure zone, you are simply reacting. And when you react, you are responding according to how your muscle memory has been, like your training based on who you have been all along. So if you have always been taking shots this way, you're going to be most comfortable taking shots that way. And in the same way, when you talk about leadership, a lot of times when you're making quick decisions, they may not be the best kind of decisions unless you have that personal discipline. Pause. You have that personal discipline to go back to your principles and your fundamentals and your values that you can actually, in the midst of that pressure, make a values-based decision or make a principle-based decision. Because if you don't have the muscle memory for that, when it's a high-stakes situation, you won't start to fall back on it. In high-stakes situation, you will tend to fall back to what you've trained on. And if you haven't been putting yourself through a highly self-governed, highly self-controlled scenario on a regular basis, it is very hard for you in a high-stakes situation to then be that kind of leader. To build that muscle, when you're talking about building that self-command muscle, I think it really starts from the small things. It starts from the small habits, like being able to wake up on time, being able to not compromise on the small things, right? So I give you an example. If you are someone who tends to cheat on parking, do you think that in a high stakes situation, and there is an opportunity for you to cheat, somebody who hasn't have that self-command, who has been cheating on like little things like parking tickets, would in a high stakes situation be able to have that self-governance required to make good decisions and to hold to their integrity when the stakes are really high? I think not. So a lot of times, building up that very fundamental ground base, being faithful in the small things, like waking up on time, seeing your tasks to the end of it, fulfilling your promises. These are kind of like the foundational things that people who want to lead one day have to keep working on to strive to hold themselves to that standard so that when the stakes are high, you don't fall back to your bad habits, but you can fall back to your training.